Have you ever considered how powerful words can be, especially those found within the pages of the Bible or Psalms? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Words, after all, have been the driving force behind some of the most significant events in our history. They've sparked revolutions, ended wars, and even shaped the core of our societies. But what happens when these words, particularly those found in sacred texts like the Bible or the Psalms, are taken out of context, misinterpreted, or used to justify harmful actions? Suddenly, they transform into something potentially dangerous. Now, when we talk about dangerous, we're not referring to a physical threat. Instead, we're talking about verses that, when misunderstood or manipulated, can lead to harmful beliefs or actions. This is where the concept of dangerous verses comes into play. These are verses that, due to their language, context, or interpretation, can be misconstrued to justify actions that are in direct contradiction to the overall message of love, compassion, and understanding that spiritual texts aim to convey. Throughout this video, we're going to explore 10 verses from the Psalms that fall into this category. We'll delve into their context, their potential for misinterpretation, and why they might be considered dangerous. We're not doing this to dissuade you from reading these verses, or to cast a negative light on the Psalms. Quite the contrary. Our aim is to foster a deeper understanding of these verses, to unravel their true meaning, and to highlight the importance of context and interpretation when engaging with any spiritual text. Remember, words hold immense power, but their true strength lies not in the words themselves, but in how we understand and apply them. Misinterpretation or misuse of these words can lead to a skewed perspective, and that's what we're trying to address here. So brace yourself as we delve into the first of our 10 dangerous Psalms. This journey may challenge your perceptions, but it will also enlighten you about the power and potential dangers of words, especially those found within our most sacred texts.
Before we continue, kindly click on the subscription button, so you can see anytime we drop a new video. Also, do not forget to like the video and share so others can also see it. Share your opinions in the comments section as well. Let's continue.
Our journey begins with Psalm 137:9, a verse often used to justify violence. This verse reads, "Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks." Quite a chilling verse, isn't it? But let's delve a little deeper. This verse was written during the Babylonian exile, a time of immense suffering and heartbreak for the Israelites. It was a cry of despair and a longing for justice from a people who had lost everything. However, when taken out of context, this cry for justice can easily be twisted into a call for revenge. It's crucial to remember that this verse is a part of a lamentation, an expression of grief and sorrow, not a command or a prescriptive teaching. It's a raw, honest, and painful expression of a deep-seated human emotion. Understanding context is key to interpreting this verse, and it should never be used to justify harm or violence. Next, we explore Psalm 14:1, a verse that can lead to harsh judgment. This verse reads, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.'" At face value, this might seem like a simple statement about disbelief, but it can be dangerously misused when wielded as a weapon to judge others' beliefs or lack thereof. In its context, this verse is part of a psalm lamenting the moral corruption of humanity. The fool here is not merely someone who doesn't believe in God, but someone who denies moral accountability. Our folly lies not in the questioning of existence, but in the denial of responsibility for our actions. However, when taken out of context, it can be used to label anyone who questions or doesn't believe in God as a fool, thereby belittling their perspective and creating a divisive us versus them mentality. Remember, this verse is a poetic expression, not a blanket statement about those who do not believe. Let's strive to respect the diversity of beliefs and the personal journeys that lead to them. Now let's quickly explore 3 more dangerous verses, Psalms 109:9, 5, 10, and 69:28. Kicking off with Psalm 109:9, "May his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow." This verse is a part of a prayer for the punishment of the wicked. It's considered dangerous because it calls for calamity to befall an individual's family, a sentiment that contradicts the more prevalent themes of love and forgiveness throughout the Bible. Moving on to Psalm 5:10, "Declare them guilty, O God, let their intrigues be their downfall. Banish them for their many sins, for they have rebelled against you." This verse is a plea for divine justice against the wicked. It's dangerous in that it encourages the idea of divine retribution, and could be misused to justify harm against those perceived as enemies. Lastly, we have Psalm 69:28, "May they be blotted out of the book of life and not be listed with the righteous." This verse is part of a lamentation, a cry of distress, and a plea for justice. It's dangerous because it calls for the ultimate punishment, the obliteration of one's name from the book of life, symbolizing eternal separation from God. These verses, while potent and sometimes unsettling, serve a purpose. They provide a raw, honest look into the human condition, our struggles, our cries for justice, our feelings of despair. They remind us that the Bible is not a book of sugar-coated truths, but a reflection of real human experiences, including the darker sides of our nature. However, their danger lies in potential misuse. Taken out of context, these verses can be used to justify harm, spread hate, or incite violence. It's crucial to remember that these verses are part of larger narratives, written in specific historical and cultural contexts. They are not standalone commands or endorsements of harmful actions. These verses, like all scripture, should be understood in their historical and literary context. We've arrived at what some consider the most dangerous verse in Psalms, Psalm 137:9. This verse reads, "Happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us, he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks." At first glance, this verse can be quite shocking and unsettling, but to understand its message we must delve into its historical context. This verse was penned during the Babylonian exile, a deeply traumatic period for the Israelites. They had been violently uprooted from their homeland and forced to live in a foreign land under oppressive rule. The pain, anger, and longing for retribution are palpable in the raw emotion of this verse. The danger of this verse lies not in its literal interpretation, but in its potential for misuse. Some may take it out of context to justify acts of violence or vengeance. However, it's essential to remember that the Bible, especially the book of Psalms, often uses strong emotive language to express the depth of human experience and emotion. It's a cry from a place of deep despair and injustice, not a call to action. Furthermore, the verse is framed in the context of a lament. Laments are a form of prayer where people pour out their deepest sorrows and frustrations to God. They are not directives or prescriptions for behavior. Instead, they are honest expressions of the human heart in times of great distress. It's also important to note that the Bible is a diverse collection of texts, written by different authors at different times and in different contexts. Each verse must be read in light of the whole biblical narrative, which ultimately points towards love, justice, and reconciliation. So is Psalm 137:9 the most dangerous verse? It could be if taken out of context and misused. But understood correctly, it reminds us of the deep pain that spurred its creation and the importance of empathy in our interpretations. This verse, like many others, serves as a reminder of the importance of context and careful interpretation. As we conclude, let's remember the power of interpretation. We've journeyed through some of the most challenging verses in the book of Psalms, and we've seen how words, if taken out of context or misused, can become dangerous tools. But the beauty of language, and particularly the language of the Psalms, lies in its ability to convey deep truths in a myriad of ways. We started with the 9th verse, a verse of vengeance, where it's crucial to understand the context in which it was written. The raw emotion expressed isn't a call for us to take revenge, but a reflection of the human desire for justice, a cry from a heart in pain. Then we moved on to the 1st verse, the fool's judgment. It's not a condemnation of those who question or doubt, but a reminder that wisdom starts with acknowledging a higher power, a greater wisdom than our own. The rapid-fire round took us through verses 3 to 5, each presenting its unique challenges. The 3rd verse, a lament, the 4th, a plea, and the 5th, a warning. Each verse, a piece of the human experience, a window into the heart of the psalmist. But perhaps the most dangerous of them all is the 9th verse, not for its content, but for its potential for misuse. It's a verse that calls for a discerning eye, a sensitive heart, and a mind open to the complexities of language and interpretation. So, as we wrap up, let's remember that the power of interpretation is not just about understanding the words on a page. It's about understanding the heart behind the words, the context in which they were written, and the timeless truths they convey. We cannot allow these potent verses to become weapons of harm or tools of manipulation. Instead, let's use them as they were intended, as expressions of human emotion, as cries for justice, as pleas for mercy, as warnings against folly. Let's always remember to approach the Bible with a discerning eye, respecting its historical and literary context, and seeking wisdom rather than justification for harmful actions.